Okay, so there's your head start. If this were a test problem, okay, and this could easily be a test problem, I think. If you take a look at this, I'd be fine with you showing this work. I mean, just kind of draw some arrows showing that you switched rows right here. And then again, double check and make sure that you got that right. And then we're going to take a couple of steps. Those steps are going to be, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do row 1 and I'm going to add it to row 2. Literally just add the two rows together because these are already the same number, just opposite signs. Now remember, we like row 1, so I'm just going to leave that. 1, -1, -4, 14. Again, don't make any mistakes when you're copying those down. If I add the two of these together, I get 0. If I add the two of these together, I get 0. Here I get -2, and here I get +4. Don't make any silly arithmetic mistakes or anything, okay? And then in the same step, what would we want to do? So that we avoid writing a ton of stuff over and over and over again. Yeah. Times row 1 by -3 and add it to row 3, right? So I'm going to show that work up here. So I'm going to multiply by -3. Let's see, that's going to be a +12. If I multiply by -3, that gives me a -42. Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So then we're going to go ahead and add these together. So that's going to give me a 0, which is what I want. 3 and -2, that makes a 1. Why is that really good news? Yeah, we're going to be able to switch row 2 and 3 now. Put these together, I get a 13. And put these together, let's see, I've got let's see, -42 plus 15. So that's going to give me, is that a 27? So I get a 27 here. And it is negative. Okay, so again, like was mentioned, we've got these operations that we did right here. Now we've got it in this form, and we notice that, well, I can take advantage. I need a 1 right here. So if I wanted to, I could add row 3 to row 2 and change row 2, but it would just be a lot easier if we just switch the two of those rows. Let's interchange those. So I'm going to take row 2, and I'm going to switch it with row 3. If I do that, here's what I end up with. I end up with the 1, the -1, the -4, and the 14. I'm going to switch these, so 0, 1, 13, -27, and I get, should I go ahead and write down this second row in the third row spot, or could I do something? Yeah, so, and if I do that, then I can take -1/2 times row 3. Once I've switched those, it's going to be in the third row, so it's going to be 0, this is going to be +1, and this is going to be a -2. Everybody good with that? Okay. -1/2 times row 3. Everybody good there? So I switched them, and when that was in the third position, the third row, I went ahead and multiplied it by a -1/2, turning that into a +1 and that into a -2. Okay? What's this called right here? Row echelon form. You're going to have to, on the test next week, at the very least, you're going to have to put it in row echelon form. You're going to have to take an augmented matrix, which this is, and you're going to have to at least put it in row echelon form. Okay? And like I said yesterday, I find putting it in reduced row echelon form just as easy, if not easier, than back substituting at this point. So here's what we're going to do. I've got 3 more goals here. I need to turn that 1 into a 0. So I'm going to take row 2 and I'm going to add it to row 1. And row 1 is the one that's going to get changed. So if I add these together, notice it doesn't screw up the one that I already made. That's going to make a 0. That's going to make a 9. And that's going to make a, let's see, what have we got here? -13. I like this row right here. We're fine with the way that is. And I like that one right there. So of the 9 goals, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 of them taken care of. The only thing I need to do is just get rid of those right there. So I'm going to do that by taking row 3 and I'm going to multiply it by negative 13 and I'm going to add it to row 2. And in the same step, I'm going to get rid of the 9 by taking row 3 and multiply it by negative 9 and add it to row 1. So this would be 0, 0, negative 13, and this is going to be positive 26. So if I put those together, I end up with, and again, row 3 is just fine, so I'm just going to rewrite that here. That's going to be 0, that's going to be 1, that's going to be 0, and that's going to be negative 1. And then I'm going to run through here and I'm going to change these because I need to use this row again to make that into a 0. So I'm multiplying by negative 9 this time. So this would be 0, 0, negative 9, and this is going to be positive 18. So 1 and 0, that makes a 1. 0 and 0. 9 and negative 9 make a 0, and this I end up with a 5. Okay? And again, I said sometimes they have that little dotted line there or a solid line. It separates the x column, the y column, and the z column, the coefficient matrix from the answer column. Okay, so on this one, we can just look at this and read off that x is equal to 5, y is equal to negative 1, whoops, and z is equal to negative 2. Okay? So we're going to write 5, negative 1, negative 2. And can somebody remind us, why do we write it as a point? Why do we write that as an ordered triple? Yes? No.
Because isn't that where all the planes meet?
That's where the planes cross. That's where the planes cross. Okay? Okay. Let's look at example number 7. If this were a test question, which again it easily could be, what would you do first? Okay, switch these. Okay, so I'm going to write 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 2, 0, 6, 3, 4, negative 1, and 13. So there's the augmented matrix we're going to start with. I'm going to pause the recording here, and then we'll pick up. Let's come back here and let's take a look at this. Here, I've got a question for you, and I want you to think about this for just a second. If we demonstrated this technique to, say, a 6th or a 7th grader, okay, would they be able to take these numbers, and we told them what the game was. Here's what you can do. You can take any row and you can switch them. You can take any row and you can multiply it by a number, and you can take any row and multiply it by a number and add it to another row. If we told them the 3 rules to the game, this sick mathematical game that we're playing here, okay, don't tell them about systems of equations. Don't tell them about x's, y's, and z's and stuff like that, okay? But do you think a 6th or 7th grader who is good at arithmetic could go through and do something like that? Could they learn to play that game with 9 goals? They could probably learn to. I mean, if they were motivated. There's a lot of stuff to keep track of, okay? But if they were good at arithmetic, they could probably figure it out, okay? And this is why we use a technique like this, because computers, if you think about it, they're really pretty dumb. They can only do what you tell it to do, okay? So if you can teach it some simple rules, or you can outline, here's what we want to do. We want to take this number, turn it into a 1. Go ahead and do that. We want to use that 1 to turn these guys into a 0. Okay? They're really pretty simple rules. The hard part is all the arithmetic that goes with it. And computers are really good at arithmetic. Okay? So if you teach it the rules, it could finish it off for you. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do on this one is we're going to use that 1 to turn those both into zeros. So I'm going to take row 1 and I'm going to multiply it by negative 2 and I'm going to add it to row 2. And remember, we like the way row 1 looks right now, so we're just going to rewrite that 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, if I multiply by negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, negative 2, if I add those together, I get 0 here, I get 0 here, I get negative 2 here, and I get 4 here. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's worth the time to stop and double check here. Then I'm going to take row 1 and I'm going to multiply it by -3 and add it to row 3. So each one of these changes to a -3. And when I put those together, I get 0 here, I get 1 here, I get -4 here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I get 10 right there. Again, this nice thing happens on this one also. In getting goal 1 and 2, or sorry, 2 and 3, I've got a 1 right here, so I can go ahead and interchange those. So I'm going to take row 2 and row 3, and I'm going to switch those. So if I do that, I end up with this. 1, 1, 1, 1. Let's see, this is 0, 1, -4, and 10. And would I bother writing this? I could go ahead and I could do this. I could take row 3 once I've switched those and multiply it by -1/2. Kind of similar to what we did in the last one. So this would be 0, 0. That's going to turn into a 1, and that's going to turn into a -2. Any questions there? Almost the same type of steps. We get something very similar. I've got 3 goals left, so let's go ahead and figure those out. I'm going to use this 1 to turn that into a 0. Remember, we said go column by column, use the 1s to make the 0s. So because I don't have this column done yet, I want to turn that one right there into a 0. So I'm going to take row 2 and I'm going to multiply it by -1 and I'm going to add it to row 1. So I get a 0, I get a -1, I get a 4, and I get a -10. So when I put those together, again, I'm changing row 1. I get a 1, I get a 0, I get a 5, and I get a, let's see, a -9, 0, 1, -4, 10. And that last row we don't have to mess with that one at all yet, okay? And then I've just got 2 steps left, and I'm going to write those down at the same time. I'm going to take row 3, and I'm going to multiply it by 4 and add it to row 2. And I'm going to take row 3, I'm going to multiply it by -5, and I'm going to add it to row 1, and that's going to take care of these, turning them into 0s. So let's see. Multiplying by 4, I get 0, 0, 4, -8. So when I put those together, and again, I like that last row. Don't have to change that at all. I get a 0 here. I get a 1 here. Let's see, that's a 0. Put these together, I get a 2, right? And then let's change these numbers here. I'm multiplying by -5, 0, 0, -5, and +10. So let's see what we get when we put them together. These two make a 1, which is what we want. These two make a 0, which is what we want. Those two make a 0, which is what we want. And then we get a +1, right? So the answer is 1, 2, -2. How many of you got that without any help? Okay, very good. Okay. If you made a mistake, hopefully you can see where your mistake is. Okay. How many of you got done with up to where there was the part of the assignment where you had to actually do this stuff? Good. Who, you finished? Amazing. Awesome. Okay. All right. So here's what we've got. By the end of class today, I want you to be ready to turn in 7-3, and it would be great if you were done or almost done or had all your questions answered on 8-1, and then come tomorrow at the beginning of class being done with 8-1, okay? All right. Any questions? Okay. All right. Go ahead and